Hello, I'm your host Jim McLean. Welcome to another one of our little YouTube videos we have here. And this week we are going to be discussing all things Batman as part of our Batman week. And we thought it was right to do a comic book 101. I don't know if there's that much people really need to know. I think the story of Batman is, and the origins of Batman are pretty well known. Usually on these little vignettes we do deal with lesser known characters, but what the hell? Fuck it. Let's just do Batman. So, as always, we are joined by Aaron Flanagan from the Comic Book Guys here in Belfast. So, hello to Aaron.
Hi, Jimbo. How are you?
I'm good, sir. I know you have a very sore leg and you'll be very worried that, and you get very annoyed if we don't mention that. But
Yep.
just for our viewers at home, Aaron has a very sore leg and it's going to
It's
keep
actually it's actually a torn calf. It's more than a sore leg, Jim.
sore leg. He's got a sore leg, and it's going to keep him out for 8 weeks. So, we're going to be talking on this little short episode about everything we need to know about Batman, and because we have the release of the new film this weekend, I'm sure, Aaron, you will be down as usual at Cineworld representing with your one leg,
Yep.
the Comic Book Guys, and I'm sure you'll have wonderful bat-filled goodies to give away on the night. As long as people pay, you're happy to kind of hand over, to take their hard-earned cash from them and get them some Batman goodies. So
Some exclusives.
yeah, okay, we've all that to look forward to. We've all that to look forward to. You might want to tell us at the end of that. I don't know, or you might want to keep it a surprise. But before we get into sharing all things Batman related and getting our bat sense tingling, that's not really a thing, but screw it, let's just go with it. Let's play a little clip of The Batman.
What's going on? Who's the mustache with the broken nose? It's Kinsey, narcotics. He's one of the guys that got into it with at the Iceberg Lounge. What are you saying, Kinsey moonlights for the Penguin? No, he moonlights as a cop.
So that's a clip of the film, and we're not going to talk too much about the Batman film. Well, maybe at the very end we'll see if you're excited about this, Aaron. But as usual, we'll go through our little kind of usual list of things. So we'll start, as we always do. Tell us a little bit about the comic book origins of the character of Batman. Now, not on what we see on the page, but what went in, the people involved into creating the iconic character that we know now as the Caped Crusader.
Yeah, well, as you quite rightly said, Jim, if you wanted to spend 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, we could talk about Batman forever. And most people, a bit like Spider-Man's origins, already know how Batman came to be. But as you quite rightly said, for people, they maybe want to find out a wee bit more about where the character came from and who created them. And it went right back. It's hard to believe, actually, Batman was created in 1939. When you think about characters who have been around for a while, he was around from the Second World War, which is crazy to think how long he's been around. But it was in 1939, and he was created by two very, very important people in the comics industry. And for a long, long time, a lot of people were saying it was only one person created him, but there was Bob Kane. He was the artist, and then there was Bill Finger. And the long debate was that it was only ever Bob Kane, fully created him. And there's been arguments for a long time but Bill Finger never got the credit that he deserved because he was fundamental in creating the character. But the first time he appeared was in Detective Comics 27. So he wasn't supposed to be necessarily a long-running character, but because they seen the popularity of Superman at the time, created by Siegel and Schuster, they wanted to create a character who had a wee bit of longevity, but somebody who was a wee bit darker, because obviously Superman was always a beacon of hope and quite light. So they decided to create, as you quite rightly said, the Dark Knight and the Caped Crusader. Now, when he first came to be, he wasn't the character that he really turned out to be in the end. You know, originally the design that they had for him was a bit more like the Phantom. You know, he didn't have the same, he had bat-like wings, he didn't have a cape, he didn't have a cowl. So the idea of Batman evolved, and it was through Bill Finger that really took off. Bob Kane's idea was the Batman, that's what he had called him, and his drawing was class, but it was thanks to the two of them. It was a real creative process that they created the character. So, but yes, he first appeared in 1939, and then because of the popularity over the first year of him appearing in that, they gave him his own run in 1940, and it was just called Batman. But I think the biggest thing and the biggest sort of compliment you can give to it is that Detective Comics is still running. It's the longest running comic in in the United States in history. You know, it's been running from 1930, or from, it's over, what is it now? It must be nearly 100 years old now. And for a comic to run that long, you know, it's phenomenal. It's up to issue 1060 odds or whatever it is now. So I think that shows you how important that Batman has entered into the sort of the pop culture and the subconscious of everybody now, you know. So we're very lucky that he was created. But over time, you know, from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right through to today, the character massively changed and evolved. You know, when he first started out, as I say, he was a detective, and it was quite, you know, but he was brutal. He was willing to kill people. You know, it was a very, very dark Batman. And in the 50s, that was what, you know, it was very pulp-esque. But then when the 60s hit, the sort of Batman character had really sort of taken a bit of a dive, so they had to try to reinvigorate him. So they made him that sort of a bit more, I think, you know, a bit campy, a wee bit more fun and a bit lighthearted. And he wouldn't kill people. He would use his smarts, but he would never kill. And again, that was to try to reinvigorate the character, because it had taken a bit of a dive. And then again, through the 70s and 80s, they realized that Batman is at his best when he is the Dark Knight, and when he is gritty, and when he is, you know, the darker side of DC as opposed to, you know, the Beacon. So again, in the 80s, they changed it again, and that was thanks to Frank Miller. Now it's something we'll talk about. It's one of the stories that when we're talking about the deep dives and readings that is essential to any Batman story. And I'm sure, Jim, you're as big a Batman fan as me, so you'll agree that The Dark Knight Returns is probably one of the best Batman stories ever told. And it's by Frank Miller, and we'll talk about why. But that was the point in my life when I read that book that I realized how high class Batman was. And it was probably that, along with The Killing Joke, are two of not only the darkest Batman stories I've ever read, but two of the darkest stories I've ever read. Comics, fiction, not, you know, they're two just phenomenal stories that were told amazingly through both the artwork and through the writing. So as I say, once that really hit in the 80s, I think Batman really hit his peak in the 80s, if I'm being honest. You know, some of the stories that we got in the 80s were really what cemented Batman to the mass market. You know, things like The Killing Joke, things like Dark Knight Returns, things like a Death in the Family. You had Year One. All those stories came in the 80s. So I say through time he evolved as a character. But the one thing, and the one standout thing for me that Batman, why I always love Batman actually, is because he was a superhero with no superpowers. He was a man who was clever. He was rich. He was a playboy.
Yeah, I was going to say he just happens to have a large amount of money. Like, let's be honest. I don't know how well the shop's going, Aaron. I don't know if you or I could really afford to kind of become Batman. Like, we could maybe get the costume. It wouldn't maybe look as good as it does on others, on me. But no, I think, you know, my budget, you know, my monthly wage is just about getting me through buying the odd comic and, you know, buying the odd Funko Pop, as you can see behind me. I don't know if I would be able to indulge in such kind of luxuries. And let's be honest, I mean, he has a stuffed T-Rex in the Batcave. We don't know it's stuffed. It's just there. Sometimes it's there. Sometimes it's not. It depends on what you're going. Now, you've mentioned there about generally kind of, you've preempted a little bit of the question about the kind of like how we saw the character kind of fluctuating and change. I would agree with you. Like the 80s, the Batman that we see on screen now, when we think of Michael Keaton, you think of Val Kilmer, George Clooney, and when we think of Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, and I'm hoping that we're going to think with Robert Pattinson. I think you can see the influence of what Frank Miller. That's very much Frank Miller, and God knows, hopefully with this new version of Batman, we won't have to see another Thomas and Martha Wayne getting minced and another set of pearls hitting the ground, because that's all Frank Miller.
Yeah.
The pearls that we think of are from Frank Miller.
Right.
But we've talked there a little bit, but just before we kind of get into talking specifics of stories, which this will probably preempt that a little bit, but some of the artists over the years, that's, we always talk about the stories are great, and I mean, I'll come into that, I'll definitely throw into that, but here are some of the big artists that we think of when we think of Batman. Who's your definitive Batman?
Well, for the great thing about Batman, because he's such a long-running character, every artist worth their salt has got to go at Batman, essentially. Now, through time, for me, the most iconic Batman, I'm torn between two. And one of them, and me and you have talked about in the past, and I know you'll talk about him more than I will. Neil Adams does one of the most definitive ever Batmans. His covers were some of the most iconic covers in history. Things like the Joker laughing fish. There's just some of his covers were phenomenal. But I think I would probably say Brian Boland. Brian Boland did The Killing Joke. That cover in my own personal collection still is the one book that I have that I will come back to, look at, and just think, this is ideal. And the thing is, it's not even Batman on the cover. It's Joker. But the story is, it's the artwork and it is just phenomenal. Again, it's a book that you'll have. Yeah, you might well have it there, Jim. It is just phenomenal. There you go. I mean, look at that for a cover. It is literally one of the best comic covers you will ever see. So there's those guys. There's also, I mean, in recent times you've had people, I love people like John McCrea who have worked on Batman, people who are very close to my heart, but other big names, like one of my favorite stories is The Long Halloween, and you had the creative team of Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale working on that, and there you go. And that artwork isn't for everybody. I mean, if you flick through and you'll show a few pages, it's very minimalist style, yeah, and I love that about it. I think it's, again, very Frank Miller-esque. It's got that flatness to it that I really love, but yeah, it's a bit Sin City-esque, and I think those type of noir stories and artwork is what really appeals to me for a character like Batman. Now, don't get me wrong, recently and in recent times, people like Jim Lee and even Jock. Jock is a modern day absolute king when it comes to drawing Batman and anything Batman related. Things like Black Mirror, there's so many really big stories recently that even Jim Lee, you take Jim Lee's poses that he's drawn, it's things like Stand on Top of the Gargoyles. That's probably one. In fact, just behind me there, you'll see on the wall, it's one of the most iconic poses that you'll see in a Batman story. And Jim Lee really brought that into the fore and through a series called Hush. And then again, Hush is another, every time you mention a story of Batman, you can't help but say it's one of the best, it's one of the best. But there's so many good stories out there, and all the artists involved through all of these have taken their own version and own slant on Batman. But as I say, I think the one that really does stand out for me is Brian Boland. He didn't work on loads and loads of Batman, but the Batman stuff that he did work on just was clean. It was just beautiful. I can't fault it at all.
Yeah, I mean, you're throwing out a couple of greats there. There's none denying. I mean, I think of recent, because I've been thinking about this, and I think you and I've talked about this before, and I know we've done various versions of this comic book 101 through audio only, and then we started, I can't remember the last one we did that was just video for the YouTube page, but
yeah,
when I was younger, I was into Spider-Man. That was it. I love Spider-Man. But then when I went to later years of school, got into 2000 AD, friend of mine, Simon Watt, TV presenter and scientist, biologist, I should say, he got me into 2000 AD and Judge Dredd, and then that's probably just one or two of the crossovers.
Yeah.
Batman, Judge Dredd, I can't remember which one specifically. There's a couple of crackers. They are a bit silly when I read them now, but put it in context, I was about maybe 13, 14, huge fan of Judge Dredd, started to see the crossovers and picked up. And I can't remember what it would have been. It would have been the collections. They do those kind of, they put in kind of the little monthly retrospectives that maybe put about 4 or 5 issues together. I just found myself hooked. And then I probably picked up. I'll tell you now. I have it here lurking behind me somewhere. Apologies, viewers, but if I can find it here, I had it somewhere. But Nightfall. I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know, because it would be too young to connect it to any of the movies. But I got into Nightfall, and then, as you know, because I've bought a good bit, not a lot of stuff, but bought a good couple of issues from you over the years, and I like to go back and get old issues and kind of. I've lost them now over time, but I had quite a large amount of Nightfall, and that's kind of was my step in, my gateway drug into Batman. I love Nightfall. I mean, it's a vast comic book, and I mean it at the time. This is the joys of comic books. You can always rewrite things, because this was the point when Bruce Wayne, aka the Batman, his back was broke, and he had to give up being Batman. I think it's Azrael takes over, and Azrael, we talked there, was too violent, and eventually, through the powers of mysticism, the cop-out for all writers, that Batman was able to heal himself, and we've seen that a couple of times over the years. But more recently, and again, I can't remember why, and I'll not put it down to the comic book guys, I'll probably put it down to the film, but I remember, like, around the time of the New 52, discovering about Comic Book Day, which we've talked over the years for quite some time over with you guys, and I would have probably picked up around the time of the New 52. There's just an issue I've picked up there. And Scott Snyder, and you know I like Scott Snyder, and I think Scott, it's a weird thing now. I don't know how you feel about this, but people talk about the effect and kind of the influence of Frank Miller stuff from the 80s. That's quite some time ago. So like the what have we got? Like the Court of Owls, the City of Owls, kind of how kind of Snyder started off, and then Zero Year, which I'm sure we'll come to. Those are now pretty much like nearly 15, 20 years on. And it's weird now to think that that was only a couple of years ago. That was like early noughties that was out. And I know I've picked up I picked up and gotten back issues. I've got the full New 52 run from I think it is 52 issues in that. And I love what Snyder did, because it was quite clever. They had Endgame, the final confrontation with Joker and the Batman, and then they went straight back and said, right, you've seen how it ends, let's go back to 0 Year. And 0 Year, I think, okay, it owes a heavy debt to Year One, but I mean, those were times I genuinely, it was that stage of you couldn't wait to next week. It was great whenever you had like a load of back issues and you go back and you can read stuff, but you got to the point it's like, right, I can't wait to go next. And I haven't had that I've been still reading, and there's a couple of ones I've been enjoying. I forget the name of the writer who's taken over now, and I know they've just changed it recently again. And they had the whole Batman and Catwoman, the marriage. There's issues that I think I've talked about this before. Rooftops, which I think is and I know I like that issue, because I've said this before, some of the best Batman stories, I think they have to be interested in not Batman, but in Bruce Wayne.
Yes.
In that sense of who the psyche of someone who puts on the cowl, who becomes Batman. I think like that's the problem what you see when Batman in the Justice League. It's literally just what gadgets and gizmos he can bring, and his distrust of everything else. He's not a trusting person. If he's met you in his life, Bruce Wayne, aka the Bat, has probably planned the perfect way how to kill you, right? If he gets to know you, that's going to be the thing. And there's issues I've loved. I mean, and I love some of those issues that were all about the relationship between Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne. And then, I mean, I love I think I've said this before in a few things. If I was like 14 or 15, like the stuff like City of Bane and stuff, I would probably have adored. But I'm 40 this year, so I think I'm sure we'll come on to this, like the Black Label stuff. Some of it I've loved, some of it I thought have been okay. But what surprises me is the Black Label, how dark they think they're going when you think back to what Frank Miller and co was doing with his Batman, and I love like stuff like, even as campy and silly as it is, his Batman and Robin run I think is What is it, 12? I forget how many issues. I have it because I should have them. I bought them from you.
I agree with you. I think part of the reason that the Black Label stuff feels like it's trying to be dark, but when you look back the way, it's nowhere near as dark as some of the stuff that was out in the 80s, but it's because of the age we live in now. There is a sense of you can only push the envelope so far. And, Black Label is dark in places. It really is. There's been some of the scenes that, for example, in Batman Damned was the first time you ever got to see Batman's whatever I don't know the best way to put it. Let's say is schlong. Is that that's not you can't use that word.
His bat pendage.
There we go. His bat pendage and
penis viewers.
But that's the thing, so it does push it to an extent that we haven't seen before, but it'll never get as dark as it used to. It won't. It physically won't. But one of the things you said there that again, as I say, if we're talking for half an hour, you can only fit so much in. But you're right, with things like the New 52, when that was a relaunch of Batman. Batman became a little bit stagnant just before that, through the 90s and early noughties. It wasn't a bad time for Batman, but something needed to happen through the whole DC line, not just Batman. Now, Batman came out of the New 52 as probably one of the most definitive runs ever on Batman. Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. I mean, talking of artists, Greg Capullo, my God, that man knows how to draw. But that like you, I was in the age reading that on a week, when I was coming out on a weekly and monthly basis, I was on tenterhooks waiting for the next issue, getting things like the Night of Owls, Court of Owls, A Death in the Family. You had all of those stories that became, as you quite rightly said, at the time you didn't think that you were living in comic book history, but looking back at it now, those issues have become as important to the younger generation as what things like Dark Knight Returns were to us. Because when people come into the shop, they'll say things like, that was the gateway that got me into comics. That was, whereas I was already knee deep in comics by that stage, but it was probably the best revamp of a character that I've ever read through, all across everything actually. And again, and that was, I think it was 2010, 2011, but the revamped it again with Rebirth, and that was what you were saying there with Tom King. And there were some cracking issues, things like Rooftops I love because it didn't need, it was like a love story really. It was just a couple of issues where there wasn't a lot of fighting in it. It was just nice interplay and exchange, and Tom King done that really, really well. But the problem became that it was coming out too thick and too fast. Those issues were getting pushed out at nearly a weekly basis, and trying to create content and try to get stories in such a quick turnaround of time must have been difficult. So they changed them went to James Tynion, and there's a period there where it became far more detective oriented again, which has been great. I've loved that again. But as you say, in 10 years' time, people will look back at this current run and will be saying the same things that we did, because some of the things that have happened in this will have lasting impacts, I have no doubt, moving forward. And it's just been announced that Chip Zdarsky is going to be taking over the run. And Chip Zdarsky has done, some of the coolest runs on Daredevil. He's done some of the coolest runs on ground and sort of street level characters, which in my eyes, Batman is. So I think that moving forward, Batman has still a fair bit of growth, in terms of the actual character development and stuff. So, we've been blessed that the character has been there for so long, that so many good writers and artists have got to tell stories. I mean, you look, one of the other stories that we haven't talked about that, it's even crazy to say, Neil Gaiman did a Batman story, and it gets a weird rap. It was, I don't know if you've read it, Jim. It's called Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader. It's only 2 issues. It's 2-issue run, and it's him and Andy Kubert, who again, phenomenal artist on Batman. But it's all about, the whole 2 issues is just about, it goes back to his origin a little bit, but it's all about how Batman came to be so vengeful, and how he became so hateful, and how he became so, his thirst for revenge was based on the murder of his parents. And it was through that. Now, I don't want to spoil too much, but Alfred really taught him everything, and taught him how important. It's really hard for me to say this without spoiling. There's a massive reveal in that the Joker was created by Alfred as a tool to exact revenge on
I love the way you weren't going to spoil it, and then you spoiled it.
Well, it's not, no, because I'm not telling you any of the reveal in it, but the point of that story was, it was a different slant on why Batman became, because everybody knows the origin, as you say, and that's thanks to, quite rightly, Frank Miller in year one. That origin with the pearls, it was, I think it was David Mazzucchelli drew those 4 issues, and they were they're ingrained in your brain. That scene, maybe it's because I've seen it so many times on TV and film, but also in the comic books they've retold that so many times. And even when we had Richard Breakover, one of the signings we did, and he played Joe Chill, who was the murderer of the parent and stuff. So it's a scene that's etched in our brains for so many different reasons. But there's moments like that you don't get in every medium. You know, it's very hard, apart from the comic book medium and some films, there isn't many other things where things like that are so ingrained in the mindset that it becomes, you know, a part of pop culture and stuff. So that's just sort of shows you how important Batman is to the modern day, really.
Yeah, I would totally agree. You know, whether or not that means I want to see poor old Martha and getting her pearls ripped again, I don't know. I mean, I think, I mean, I love the Burton version of it. I mean, the Burton got there first back in 1989 with that. The reason I should know that, release that film off the top of my head, but I would say if you're looking for like an artist just lifting just a panel from the pages of a comic onto the big screen, as much as I don't like them, the version that Zack Snyder gave us in Batman versus Superman, you can feel it's something I'll praise Zack Snyder rarely, but I do. You can see the panels, you know, the pages turning as you can come across. You can imagine each being a panel, and you can see the influence of that. But I would agree with you. I mean, it's like, I know. I mean, at the minute there just seems to be so much Batman out there between the Black Label stuff and various runs. I know I don't read Detective Comics. I just read the Batman, as you know, because you have my pull list. But I know every so often you'll try and, Jim, what about this?
What about this new miniseries? What about this new Batman miniseries?
You're just like a wee drug dealer. It's like, Jim, what about this one? In this one, you get to see Batman Schlong. Yep, mate,
I'm in.
Sign me up. And you open it up and you go, and that's him in the cold? Fuck's sake. But part of me does think there's maybe a little bit too much out there right now, and that's just me. That's my minor grip, just because just the sense I can't buy it all. I can't afford to do it all. And I think if you are a big time reader of Batman, you probably need the old Bruce Wayne's coppers, you know, or either that or, you know, Scrooge McDuck. You need something like that because it's an expensive place to be a big fan of Batman. And I know I'm sure there's comic book readers coming to you that spend a lot more than me every week, Aaron, but I can just
you spend a fair whack. There is people have, you know, there's people who'll buy one Batman run and will only stick to the one. There's people who say the one. There is a lot of our customers who, especially for characters like Spider-Man and Batman, and you do it to an extent, Jim, who, because you love the character so much, you're happy to try to read as much of it or all of it as you can. As you quite rightly said, though, with Batman especially, and as I say with Spider-Man, there are so many titles now. Yes, there's the core titles, there's Batman and Detective, but beyond that, because of the popularity of Batman, and because it, you know, for all intents and purposes, Batman's a cash cow for DC. Of course he is. So they will keep creating Batman miniseries. They'll keep creating short stories. But a lot of those are fantastic short. You know, some of the best stories we just talked about weren't part of them. In fact, most of them we talked about weren't part of the main run. You know, and I think that's testament to DC trying risky moves or trying things that are a wee bit different. But as you say, at the minute there is a plethora. In fact, there was just recently in February there was 1 week that DC came out and said every single book that was released that week was a Bat title, which, if you think about it, I can't remember the exact number, but it was maybe 25 titles or something like that was out that week. And that's, you know, from Batman, and you've got Batman Urban Legends, Batgirls, you've got Batman Detective. There was Batman Reptilian, everything came out that week. And it, as much of a novelty as it was also a moment where you sort of thought, there's a lot of Batman out there at the minute. And yes, you know, unlike other characters who have went through iterations of different versions of a character, Batman's pretty much stayed the same Batman as we've come to know him. As you say, there was a little period where Azrael took over, and there's been periods, different versions, like, you know, when Lucius Fox's son took over for a while. But generally, it always comes back to Bruce. So there's a lot of content out there, and it's a lot of content still getting published now. It would be nice for maybe some of the series to maybe come together and there not be so many titles out there. But for me as a retailer, of course, yes, I love seeing all these titles, but also as long as people are enjoying them, I love seeing them. I don't want it to just be a case of people are only picking it up. Oh, Batman, I have to get this now, you know. And at the minute, we're in the sweet spot where people are enjoying the stories. There's some crackers out there, but well, you know, for as long as Batman keeps pulling in the doors, DC will keep pumping out Batman.
And you're happy to have it as be a facilitator for that, Josh. I would agree. There's a lot out there. That said, though, I'm not reading it every week, and every time I pick up my couple issues, I'm not reading it going, oh, this is a bit dull. There was a couple we talked about this. There was a couple of weeks with the City of Being stuff where it felt like, hang on, you're stretching this out. Like there's a whole dream sequence, and it's like you could have done this in 1-2 issues, and I think it was like nearly like 8 or 9, or it felt like a lot more. It just was too long. But I mean, that's me. I mean, I'm sitting here. I've actually enjoyed. Again, it comes back to Rooftops. I've been enjoying Batman, Catwoman, not just for the sexy covers, but you know, let's not pull on that thread, and let's not kind of go about boys talking about sexy Catwoman. Let's not go down that. But also, I mean, of more recent years, I mean, I've loved. I think it was you actually introduced me to it. The White Knight by Sean Murphy.
Unreal.
It's probably like there for me is a Batman run. I think in 10, 15, 20 years, I think could be seen as something that's like, right, yeah, that's going to be in the same league of what Frank Miller did.
Yeah.
I wasn't as keen on the follow-up.
Yeah.
But I think that's because I think the first issue of that, the first run, The White Knight, I think, what is there, 8, 9? You'll know this.
There's 8 issues in the first run, or 6 issues in the first run.
6 issues in the first run.
The second one had 9 or 12, but that run, as you quite rightly say, it's going to be massive in the future. You'll remember from reading it, the first page of the first issue in that run was hark back to when we're talking about stuff that was dark. If you'll remember, he had the Joker by his throat. Batman was holding the Joker by his throat and had poured, you know, a whole tub of tablets into his throat to try to kill him. When would you see Batman trying to... the Batman doesn't try to murder people, certainly not in such a, you know, a despicable manner. And the point that comic, and I followed the Jack Napier Joker, which was cool. You know, it took the slant of the Jack Napier version of the Joker, and it turned the good guy, bad guy on its head, that whole motif. And God, that run was, again, it's a run I haven't read now, and maybe, what was that, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that was out when we talked about it. But some of the stuff that came out of that, I could imagine us talking about that in 10 years going, you know, that'll make a brilliant film. That'll make, you know, you can just see that on the big screen and stuff like that. So yeah, that's another on a forgotten gem.
I think if I'm right, I think it is being made into an animated movie, or it has been made into an animated movie. Yeah. I'm not quite certain what way the land it is. You know, on that note, as we always do in this bit, you know, there's a point where we hand over to you. What are the issues that you as a store, you would love if someone's watching this? Or, well, we used to have this on the podcast, now it's just video. If someone's watching this, what would be the issues in good quality you would love to see someone kind of coming through your door on a Monday morning, on a wet Monday morning when you've hobbled to work on your one leg? What would you love to see someone just bringing through the door, Aaron, and saying, look, I found this. I was up in the attic and my dad had this and he's left us, you know, so fuck him. It's not his anymore. I don't think he even had this. Do you think this is worth anything? And what would make your eyes just kind of pop out your socket?
When it comes to Batman, Detective Comics 27, somebody brought that through the door, my goodness, the other leg would fall off too. That's a book, a bit like Action Comics. It's the type of book that's worth millions, not tens of thousands is great, thousands is great, hundreds is great, but this is worth millions. You know, that's how important that book has become. You know, obviously, not everybody's going to find that in their loft. It would be lovely. There's not going to be that many of them kicking about anymore. It's a book that's over 80 years old, 90 years old. It's going to be a rare one to find, and in Heritage Auction, whenever it comes up, the very, very occasional time it does come up, it always goes for millions or hundreds of thousands anyway. In terms of books, though, if people are, what I love to see people coming through with now is books, Batman books from the 70s. There's a run of about 40 or 50 issues in the 70s that started introducing characters that have become obviously massive today. You know, a lot of the villains and a lot of that rogues gallery were introduced in a lot of those issues. So, you know, Ra's al Ghul and Batman 232, books like that, those type of books which are worth hundreds of pounds now, you know, are ones that we would actively love more people to bring in, but I want people, if they have them in their collection, to know what they have. As I say, there's the whole Neil Adams run. There's so many iconic covers that people, if they walk in, you know, just because of the nature of the cover, things like the Joker laughing fish, just because of the elements of that cover, things like Killing Joke, the Killing Joke, somebody brought that in. It's a book that I remember buying it back. Now it wasn't when it was first out, but I remember being able to pick it up for about 7 or 8 quid, which at the time for me, when I was a kid, 7 or 8 quid was still more than a comic when you were paying 50p or a pound for a comic. But now, for a first print in Killing Joke, it easily sells for anywhere between 60 to £100, depending on condition. So, and that's still a lot of money for a lot of people, but that's a modern book. That's, you know, that's not an old, you know, it's not a book from the 30s, 40s. It's a book from the late 80s, you know. So it just shows you that anything, and I've said it before in this, any issue that has a first appearance or a death or a, you know, character or something important happening in it is going to be worth a bit more. Not always the case, but when you look at even the current run, there's issues in that current run that you will have, Jim, that now already have started to go up in value. You know, things like issue 50, you know, where the wedding of you'll have it exactly, you'll have it in there. It's not worth a great deal, you know, it's worth more than cover price now, but there's potential for these books to rise, and that's what people have to realize, that as important they are reading them, and that's why I love comics for reading them. Some of them do hold inherent value on a financial level as well, and you know, there's too many books to mention in terms of, you know, key books for Batman, because there is just so many out there. And you know, if you go back to the 80s, Batman Year One as a story, the 4 single issues of that run would have cost £2 when that was out. You can't buy that miniseries now. We do have it in the shop, but you won't be able to buy it for more than, or it's about a 40 to £60 set now for 4 issues, that because again of the significance of what happens in that story. So the thing to always look out for in your collection is significant stories. I mean, one of the ones you mentioned earlier was the breaking of Batman's back. Again, Nightfall, as you said, ran over every title it felt at the time. Feels like there's about 2,000 issues. There's not that many. There's about 50 issues in a run, but in that run, that one issue is worth maybe £10 to £15, which again, not standard, not massive value, but a lovely issue, one that people are always after. Has a cracking gatefold cover that when you open it up, you know, it's half die cut and stuff. And issues like that are ones I love seeing coming in, because they're ones that, I know, contrary to what you think, I'm not in just going, give me money. I'm not Mr. Krabs for something. But issues like that, I love when somebody brings it in and I can bat off them. They're letting go of something that they have no interest in, or they have had their enjoyment out of it. And the thing that I love is those books, whilst they're key, are accessible for slightly younger people, or people who want to get into the collecting motif, or they want to have some significance in their collection that they might not be able to afford the first Ra's al Ghul or the first Catwoman or whatever issue it is. So issues like that are the ones I love seeing coming in, because it means we can sell them at a very affordable price point for every level of collector. And so it's those level of books that I like about Batman, and because some of them tell some of the best stories.
Yeah, very nicely put, Aaron. I don't believe that you're not Mr. Krabs, but the sentiment, you sold the sentiment, that's what I'll say. I know the last couple of questions, and I know you've kind of touched on that being there's so many runs at the minute, but I will ask you to kind of pick out anything of note right now. If anyone's watching, go sees the Batman this weekend, maybe goes to Cineworld where you'll be, picks up your exclusive merchandise, and then decides on a Monday, right, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna start reading Batman. Like, I know I always throw it, like, if you're ever looking for a read that I would recommend, and I've went wax lyrical about this, Batman Prey, I just think is a hidden little gem. I think it's set in around the same time, so it's very much part of kind of the Miller verse. The artwork you can kind of see there is very much kind of Frank Miller-esque style. I was kind of saying it's Paul Galacki, who's not an artist I know too much about, but I just love it. I love the character of Hugo Strange, his obsession with Batman, that he wants to become Batman, and to become Batman he has to eliminate the original so he can become the imposter. He has his own little Batman costume. It's okay, I'm not really selling it. It sounds quite cheesy when I sell it, but
it is. It's a great read.
I loved it for what it was, and I can't remember how or why. I'll probably tell you, I probably picked it up around the time of Arkham City, the video game that had Hugo Strange, because Hugo Strange, I think, is a really underrated villain. I think he's someone. I think he needs to be seen on the big screen? I think he would be a good villain in the same way like someone like Raj Al Ghul.
Yeah.
When we saw that kind of character, I don't think he's going to be a definitive villain, but I think he definitely, it's what he opens the potential to, and kind of, I'm rambling a little bit, I know, but kind of going more the kind of psychological aspects of the character. But I know before we get into kind of current reads, I know you've talked quite a few. Is any other little hidden gems you'd recommend people seeking out?
The one that anytime somebody comes in, the one story I always recommend without fail is Long Halloween. It is. I know I mentioned it a wee bit earlier, but it for me is one of the if we're using the word again, gateway. It's one of the easiest, in my eyes, one of the easiest stories to read because it feels so cinematic reading. When you're reading it, it's very easy to follow. There's so many twists and turns in it. I'm not going to spoil that one. Actually, there's so many twists, and they have obviously a bit like most of the good Batman stories. They've made an animated film of it now, which is very good. I quite enjoyed it. But that's the one that if I wanted to try to get somebody into reading Batman to really enjoy Batman, it's usually one of the first things I'd recommend. I mean, obviously there's loads of stories, as we said, but that's one that I have a fondness for. It's one that I would reread. Rereadability, if that's a word, is something that
you've said it, so stick with it. Just say it with confidence. Say it with confidence. That's the way to look at it. I
can't say it twice. It's a tongue twister. It's one of those books that there's not many that I always love reading something new. It's generally something that I live by. There's a lot of people, but Kira, for example, she'll watch the same thing over and over again for comfort factor and stuff. I prefer delving into something new most of the time. But when there is something that I will actively go back and reread, it's generally a sign it's something that means quite a lot to me. And it's weirdly, for whatever reason, it's the graphic novel I bring away on holiday every single time we go away. I read it on the plane every time. I don't know why. I already know what the twists are, but it's a wonderful story. Artwork's unreal. So that's the one I would recommend. I know, as I say, if you listen back at the start, all the stories we mentioned earlier are all brilliant ones to get involved with. There are so many hidden gems out there. We ones like Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader isn't even a story that many people know. So things like that. Batman, so many of the 80s Batman stories, the ones like the Dracula Batman, I'm sure, Kelly Jones's versions of Batman. There's just so many. There's too many to mention. What we can do, what I'll maybe do is curate a list together, and we'll maybe put it up in the comments section or something for people to read, if they are looking for a definitive list. But fear not, if you come into the store, I will help you find no end of Batman stories.
You will help people spend their money. That's basically what you're saying. On that note, like I'm surprised I haven't mentioned the Batman the Long Halloween, because you're right, it's one I love reading, and it's one that I know that the Matt Reeves, I think the director of the Batman, has cited as being an influence for him on this particular film, and the idea of the rogues gallery, that what you see in the Long Halloween. So yeah, I mean, it's one I know. I'm pretty sure. Has it been made already as an animated movie, or is it in the Yeah, I think it has. If it doesn't have Kevin Conroy voicing Batman, then I tend to avoid it. It's like when they made the animated movie of the Dark Knight Returns, and they had Peter Weller, RoboCop, and
he was.
I love Peter Weller, but it's like, can we just re-record it and have Kevin Conroy? If it's an animated Batman, it has to be Kevin Conroy. That's my rule, right? That's my small rule. It's the small hill I'm prepared to die. Because if I see it and it's like the animation looks great, looks amazing, and then go, you're not Batman. It's like Mark Hamill has to be the Joker for me and everything.
Yes. No, I agree.
I don't know. Is Mark Hamill in The Dark Knight? I know he's in The Killing Joke, because Kevin Conroy is back as Batman in that, that they made a bit of a mess in that one. But let's not go down that one. Let's not pull on that thread right now, because we're not here to talk about that. I don't think he's Joker in The Dark Knight Returns. I don't think so.
There's a couple. I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember. They tried to obviously get the aged voices, and Hamill would have worked perfectly, but I think Weller worked. I thought he worked well, because Batman is supposed to be what in his late 50s, 60s, and that. So I think it worked for it. But I think in
No,
Long
because
Halloween,
Aaron, because all he wanted, anytime he opened his mouth, is all I could hear was "Dead or alive, creep, you're coming with me." I was like,
you're coming
that's
with
not
me.
But look, I don't want to let it go down too much down talking about animated movies. Another one, I know I've kind of pointed this. This is a little collected one that my lovely wife picked me up. That is signed by John Wagner, and not at the time that we met him, for our Judge Dredd event. But I absolutely, there's a few crackers in here, and again, I know they're a bit cheesy by today's standards. We have the Ultimate Riddle with the Riddler, of course, and Die Laughing, which is just pure cheese. I know it's cheesy, but I love the artwork. The Joker wants to join the dark judges, and there's just some great over the top artwork in it, and I have a real soft spot for it.
When you think about it, I am sure. I'm now. This is just my own personal opinion. That book, I am sure, must have had an influence on the character who exists now, the Batman Who Laughs. The Batman Who Laughs looks like looks like Judge Death, and everybody says that. And he's one of the coolest looking Batman variations of Batman that there is. One of the coolest Batman type characters that there has been created in the modern day. And I do genuinely think, as you say, it comes from that era of the sort of Simon Bisley-esque artwork that you would have got back then. So very as cheesy and as cheese-tastic as crossovers are, some of them are unreal. You're definitely worth a read for sure.
Yeah, and whilst I agree with you that that Joker's pretty cool, I just didn't like Metal. Metal was because there is the thing. I think the beauty of a great Batman story is the fact that you can just drop in on it.
Yeah.
Drop in it and you don't need too much. And I think, we are getting in deep, I know, but I think Scott Snyder is quite guilty of this, of having come in. You need to have a lot of prior knowledge, and it's not just prior knowledge of Batman generally, but it's like his Batverse, and there's a lot of stuff. And I think Metal, I'm nearly certain, I think I've handed in my issues to you when I finally was trying to make room, because I just found it's like I didn't enjoy rereading them, because it just was like, right, oh fuck, what happened again? Oh fuck, let me get the other issue. It's like, right, oh, and then what the I have to go to this one, and it was just, there was just too much going on. And Metal, as much as I love the idea for it, and I love the kind of idea, and this was apparently the thing Scott Snyder has been building up and building up, it didn't grab me in the way, like, say, the simplicity of Zero Year. I mean, Court of Owls and City of Owls. What a way to start. Like, I think in the opening issue, I think Batman, well, we always call him Batman, but Bruce Wayne, I think he throws himself in a river to try and get something, and he nearly dies, and it's just like, well, if I die, I die. Very Victor Drago, or Hugo, or whatever you call him from Rocky IV. But look, we're going to wrap this up. So right now, it's the week before Batman is being released. I'm going to say re-released. Batman's being released in cinemas. So as we say, people go see this at the weekend. I've my tickets booked for Cineworld for IMAX. Other cinemas are of course available for this Saturday. I think that's going to always be my little treat. The film I want to go see is going to be in IMAX. Yep. So Monday morning, someone's went to see Batman over the weekend. They come in and say, seen the Batman movie, absolutely loved it. What would be the issues you'd be pointing them in? New issues, not so much. We've talked there about old issues and classic issues. What are the runs right now that you maybe suggest kind of taking a wee plunge into? Because I know, like, the Batman issue, I think, is into 112.
Yep.
It's quite far in, but as you said, I know we're going to have a new writer starting soon. So usually when that's the case, they clean up and then give a new writer a new pretty clear jumping on point.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I think the cinematic universe and the comic universe have came closer and closer now. So what DC will obviously do is, for this Batman film coming out, it's not going to be a Batman version of, with the film, but they will have the comics have creating jumping on points and starting points. So the two that I would recommend getting into ASAP, are the main Batman line, as you say. Even though it's at issue 112, 113, it doesn't matter. The story arcs, the great thing about that story at the minute, as you said earlier, is, and you're reading something good if you can just drop into it. And with Batman, it's maybe, it's a story that once Chip takes over, Chip Starsky, it's going to be one of the funnest versions of Batman with also a real sense of heart. So Batman, the main line, get into it now just before that starts, just so you get a sort of a feel for the way the current run's going. That and the mainline detective. The mainline detective comics has been phenomenal. It's a Bat family related book, so you're getting the flavor of all the Bat related characters. Again, there's so many good miniseries out there at the minute, that some of them are naturally coming to an end. There's even Batman Scooby-Doo mini mysteries, which was cool. It was a really good one. There's Batman Bigby from the Wolf Among Us and stuff. So there's lots of good miniseries out there that are sort of naturally coming in. And One Dark Night was probably one of my favorite miniseries that's just started. So it's a good one to get into. One Dark Night. I'm not sure if it's one that you've read yet, Jim. It's by Jock, and again a bit cinematic in terms of the premise. Is Batman has to transport one of the big villains from one side of the city to the other. On one dark night, he's got one night to do it. But while he's transporting him, like any good story, things go astray. It's not as he planned. He gets a bit injured, and well, I'll say no more. But that's the first issue. That's only just come out. Part of the Black Label stuff was dark. It's gritty. Artwork's phenomenal because it's Jock. Jumping on point for sure. Only going to be 3 issues. Oversized prestige format. Looks great. Brilliant. That's the place to go.
Oversized issue. You had me sold. I was ready to say, yeah, I'll come down, Aaron, put me that in my pile. You probably have tempted me because I like the concept for that, because I'm surprised it's not in my pile, but you know that I'm...
Oversized.
I just don't like oversized issues unless it's an actual graphic novel, because then it's all collected, because I only have so much shelf space, and the oversized ones won't fit in my box. Innuendo bingo there, but let's not go there. The only thing I will say, right, and I know we're going to wrap things up, so you've definitely answered all my questions. The one thing, maybe it says more about me than and where my Batman taste is, we haven't mentioned Grant Morrison.
Oh,
we haven't mentioned Grant Morrison, who really did kind of... I know at times some of his stuff was quite campy and light, which I love, and probably in around that time was around the time I got into Batman because of that, and looking back at older issues and stuff. But and you've seen the whole stuff as a Batman Incorporated and stuff, and
Arkham Asylum,
and all that stuff. But also as well with Grant Morrison, you get the kind of, I'm nearly certain it was in his tenure, you had the whole run of Batman Through Time, kind of idea, and your reaction says it all. Kind of what your thoughts about that? But look, I was of an age where that was just at the right time.
Yeah.
For me, reading it now, I'd probably turn my nose up at it and go back and read something else.
Yeah.
But if I was at the right time, at a right age, right time, I would have loved it. So it's just, before we go, anything else you want to say about Grant Morrison? Because I know he's one of, I think,
one of the most definitive.
Yeah, he's one of the most definitive, but he also doesn't often get the credit, and he kept it going at a time and brought it back to popularity. Because if I remember right, Batman wasn't as popular, and then it wasn't that it was not selling, but he definitely brought it back to some sense of popularity.
It's hard to believe that we through all the names, but that's part of the problem, because there's so many big people who have worked on it, and there's only a finite amount of time. But Grant Morrison should be, and he is up there with the best for me for who have worked on Batman. I say stories like Arkham Asylum don't get the credit they deserve. He pulled Batman out of the mire when, it was during a time, if you're being honest, it wasn't the best time for Batman when he took over. There was a sketchy period of maybe 5-6 years where Batman, the books were just getting produced. But for whatever reason, you alluded to it, some of Morrison's stuff is like Marmite. You do either love it or you hate it. There's no real in between. I'll have people who come in, and when I'm singing its praises, they'll go, "That's absolute crap. I have no interest in that." But that's the lovely thing about comics. That's the same about any artist. It's the same about any writer. It's the same about any creative team. It's the same about any book. It's all down to personal taste. Every single element of it, from the writing to the artwork. And Grant Morrison's writing, I've always enjoyed it. Most of his stories, not even just his Batman stories, I've read and will continue to read. But as Batman goes, he really did steady the ship for Batman and got it to a point where he was sort of working on it, before Scott Snyder took over the helm, and he really did set a sort of a base for fans to come back to sort of fall in love with Batman again, I think, anyway, because it was through Incorporated and stuff. I really enjoyed that stuff, really. And as I say, what Scott Snyder did with it after that really took it to the next level and brought it to the Batman that we know now.
Yeah. Look, we've talked quite a bit. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of time left, so we don't don't have to talk about Kevin Smith's little graphic novels for Batman, which I just do not like at all.
Yeah.
As much as I love Kevin Smith, but maybe there are fans of it out there. If you are, put a comment in the YouTube page if there's any runs. I'm sure we've missed a load.
Loads.
I'm sure there's one you'll be like, Jim, can't believe I forgot that. Can't believe I forgot this. Blah 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 blah. We haven't mentioned Hush. I know that, which is another one, but we'll not have time. So don't blame us. Blame Aaron. And if you get really annoyed about all the issues that Aaron, if you're watching this, right, and if you watch it and you go, why didn't they talk about this? Why didn't they talk about that? Don't put it in the comments. Just walk into the comic book guys, Great Victoria Street, and say, what are you doing? Or just come up to them at Cineworld. So I'm guessing you're going to be there on Friday evening when the film launches.
Yep, it's Thursday midnight.
Thursday,
Friday,
okay.
whatever way that works. I'm never sure how these midnight timings work out, but I think it's Thursday and Friday. So yep, we'll be there midnight launch. We're gonna have lots of goodies. Batman, what we would say are taster issues. We've brought issues along that will really get you into reading Batman. About what you were saying earlier, you know, where would you jump on with Batman? So we've brought some cool graphics, some good comic starting points. There's gonna be T-shirts, Funkos, Jumbo Funkos. There's gonna be exclusives. There's going to be some stuff you'll have to go there to find out. There's going to be some groovy stuff. So,
will Batman be there though, and not Jared in costume?
No, there is going to be a Batman there.
Happy days. There we go.
I've got my costume ready.
There we go. There you saw it. You heard it here first, folks. So look, that's to look forward to. I'm looking forward to the film.
Yeah,
we will talk about it, I'm sure, on either the TV show, which should be back by then, by the time the film's out, or just on one of these little videos, or on a possible written review. Remember when we used to do those, viewers? Yeah, we're going to try and get back to doing that. So look, that's all we've time for. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. There's loads of more of these little videos to look through.
Like and share, all that kind of nonsense, and spread the word. And yeah, if you have any annoyances about this, my name is Austin Flanagan. That is Aaron Flanagan, and just share all grievances in store physically with the comic book guys at Great Victoria Street. So, Aaron, thank you very much for your time. As always, enjoyed chatting about this. I guess in the next one we might have to get round to doing is a character I know very little about, but very Batman related. Is Moon Knight. I'm sure we're gonna have. I remember mentioning this before and you got very excited. I know nothing about the character, really. So I'm going to be interested in that because I think that will probably be our next one because I think it's in March time that is hitting Disney+. So that will probably be our next Comic Book 101, which will be available soon. We'll probably do this about once a month. And after that, we'll just have to wait to see what's coming out. So, Aaron, thank you very much. Thank you.